The press pass arrived at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. No letterhead, no subject line. Just a time, an address in W8, and 3 words at the bottom of the email: bring your laptop. I had been covering the technology and public affairs beat for 6 years by that point. I had been to product launches in glass towers where men in expensive trainers told me their app was going to change democracy. I had sat through parliamentary committee hearings on misinformation that ended with nobody agreeing on what misinformation actually was. I had filed more stories about deepfakes than I could count, most of them beginning with the phrase "experts are concerned" and ending with no particular solution in sight. So when the email came through from the communications office at Kensington Palace, my first instinct was not excitement, it was suspicion. Not because I thought it was fake, because I thought it was going to be another room full of concerned people with no plan. I replied within 4 minutes, confirmed, see you at 9. I did not sleep particularly well. The next morning, I took the tube to High Street, Kensington, and walked the rest of the way. It was overcast, that particular London grey that is not quite rain, but is not quite not rain either. I had my recorder, my notebook, my laptop as instructed, and a coffee I had picked up at a small place on Kensington Church Street that I had been going to for years. The man behind the counter, Marcus, asked me where I was off to looking so serious. I told him I wasn't entirely sure. He nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable answer and handed me my flat white. The gates were already being managed differently. I noticed it before I even reached them. There were 2 officers on the outer approach who were not normally there. Not aggressive, not obstructive, just present in that very particular way that trained security people are present, which is to say they were watching everything while appearing to watch nothing. A woman in a dark coat with a lanyard I did not recognize checked my name against a physical list, not a tablet, an actual printed list. She drew a single line through my name with a biro, looked up and said, "Laptop will need to go through the scanner separately." I asked her what the briefing was about. She said, "Someone inside will explain." I asked her how many press were attending. She said, "Someone inside will explain." I stopped asking questions and put my laptop in the tray. Inside, I was taken through 2 corridors I had not been through before. Not the ceremonial routes, not the formal reception areas, but something more functional. Carpeted but plainly. Fluorescent strip lighting above a section that had clearly been adapted for working use rather than visiting use. There were extension cables taped along one wall. A whiteboard on wheels had been pushed against a window. Someone had written 4 words on it in red marker and then erased them, but not completely. You could still see the ghost of the letters underneath. I counted 9 other people in the room when I arrived. None of them were journalists. I knew this not because I recognized them, I didn't, but because of the particular energy of people who are not performing for anyone. They were sitting in various states of focused dishevelment. One man, late 20s, had a mechanical keyboard in front of him that he had clearly brought from home. A woman across from him had 3 browser windows open and a half-eaten cereal bar balanced on top of her monitor. An older man in the corner, maybe 55, was reading something on his phone and making small sounds to himself that were not quite words. There was coffee on a side table, instant, not good. I poured a cup anyway. Nobody told me what we were waiting for. At 9:06, the door at the far end of the room opened. He was not wearing a suit. This sounds like a small thing, and I understand that. But when you have covered public life for any length of time, you develop a very precise sense of what people wear when they want to be taken seriously in an official capacity versus what people wear when they actually want to get something done. Prince William came through that door in a plain navy jumper, dark trousers and shoes that were good but not ceremonial. No tie, no pocket square, no aide, walking 2 steps behind him, making sure the room was ready. He was followed by one person, a woman named Sarah, who introduced herself simply as his coordinator for the day and who immediately moved to the side of the room and opened her own laptop and did not speak again for a very long time. William looked at the room looked at William. Then the man with the mechanical keyboard, who I later learned was named Daniel, 26 years old, freelance security researcher from Bristol, said, without looking up from his screen, "There's coffee on the table, but I'd skip it if I were you." William said, "Yeah, I had some, you're right." And that was more or less how the ice broke. He sat down at the main table, not at the head of it, which was where I had assumed he would position himself, but roughly in the middle, where there was an open space between Daniel and a quiet, precise woman named Priya, who I would come to understand was the most technically capable person in the room and who at this point was annotating something in a notebook with a mechanical pencil and had not looked up since William walked in. There was no formal introduction, no welcome remarks. A man named Tom, who appeared to be loosely organizing the group. He had the manner of someone who had been awake for longer than was advisable and had made peace with it, stood up and said, "Right, so William knows the broad shape of this. For anyone who doesn't, we'll go through the presentation first and then break into groups. We've got the room until 5, possibly 6 if we need it." Someone asked, "What happens at 6? Tom said, "I imagine we go home, and if we haven't solved it by then," Tom said, "we come back tomorrow." William said nothing during this exchange. He was reading something on a tablet. He looked, for all the world, like someone who had shown up to do a job and was getting his bearings before the job started. There was no performance of interest. There was actual interest, which is a different thing entirely, and rarer than it should be in rooms like that one. Tom dimmed the lights and pulled up the presentation from a laptop that was held together at one hinge with what appeared to be electrical tape. The first slide had no title. It was just a video. The video was 43 seconds long. It showed a well-known public figure, a politician, someone whose face and voice the entire room would have recognized immediately, delivering a statement about a foreign policy decision. The delivery was calm and authoritative. The lighting was consistent. The audio was clean. At the end of the video, Tom said, "That statement was never made. That person never said those words." Every frame of that video was generated. It was posted on 4 platforms simultaneously at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning last November. By the time it was flagged and removed, it had been viewed 1.4 million times and had been cited as a news source by 2 regional outlets and 1 national one. Nobody said anything. Tom clicked to the next slide. "This one," he said, "is of a different public figure. This one was circulating for 11 days before anyone formally identified it as synthetic. In that 11 days, it was used in a legal filing in a civil case, shared by 3 verified accounts with a combined following of 8 million, and translated into 6 languages." He paused. "And this one, next slide, is of Prince William. The video was uncomfortable to watch, not because it was obviously wrong, but because it was not obviously wrong. The figure on screen looked correct, moved correctly, the voice carried the right register and the right cadence. It was saying something that William had never said in a context that had never existed, at an event that had never happened. It had been created, Tom explained, using publicly available tools, no specialist equipment, no significant budget, a laptop and patience, and about 4 days of processing time. The platform it had appeared on had taken 61 hours to remove it. William watched the video of himself. His expression did not change in any dramatic way. He leaned forward very slightly, elbows on the table, and he watched it through to the end. Then he said, "How many people have the tools to make that?" Tom said, "Right now." "Conservatively, anyone with a mid-range laptop and an internet connection." William said, "And how many people have the tools to prove it's fake?" Tom said, "That's why you're here." The scale of it settled into the room slowly, the way cold settles into a space when a window has been left open, not all at once but steadily until everyone was feeling it. The problem was not new. Everyone in that room knew the problem existed, but there is a particular difference between knowing something abstractly and seeing a clean, confident video of a real human being saying something they never said, and understanding that 61 hours is a very long time for a lie to travel. Tom ran through the technical breakdown, detection methods currently in use, their accuracy rates which were improving but not fast enough, the gap between how quickly synthetic media could be generated and how quickly it could be identified. The particular challenge of compressed video, when a deepfake is shared enough times, re-encoded enough times, the digital artifacts that detection tools rely on begin to smooth out, making the fake harder to flag the more it spreads, which is precisely the opposite of how the problem should work. The woman with the cereal bar, whose name was Kemi, and who turned out to be one of the sharper minds in the room, said, "So the tool needs to work on degraded copies, not just originals." Tom said the tool needs to work on whatever actually gets shared, which is never the original. Daniel hit 3 keys in a row on his mechanical keyboard, which I would come to understand was his version of swearing. By 10:30, they had broken into 3 working groups, and the room had transformed from a briefing space into something that felt more like the aftermath of a very organized explosion. Group 1, at the far end of the table, was focused on metadata, the invisible information embedded in video files that could potentially carry authentication signatures. Tom was leading this group, along with a quiet man named Rohan, who had said almost nothing during the presentation, but who, the moment the working session began, started producing observations at a rate that suggested he had been thinking about this problem for considerably longer than the morning. Group 2 was working on visual detection, the pixel-level analysis of faces and lighting that current tools used, and why those tools kept failing on compressed content. Kemi was here, along with a young woman named Fatima, who had come down from Edinburgh specifically for this session, and who had opinions about frame interpolation that she delivered with quiet, total certainty. Group 3, the smallest, just 3 people, was focused on something that Tom had called provenance tracking. Where did a video come from? What path had it taken? Could you build a system that logged a video's journey in a way that was tamper-resistant and publicly readable without exposing private user data? William sat with Group 3. He did not arrive at Group 3 with an agenda. He sat down, introduced himself to the 2 people there, a man named James, mid-30s, who worked in cybersecurity policy, and Priya, who had finally looked up from her notebook and said, "Tell me what you're trying to do and where you're stuck." James explained the basic architecture they were sketching. A decentralized ledger system, not a blockchain in the buzzword sense, but a similar underlying logic that could record the first appearance of a video file and create a chain of custody as it was shared, copied, and re-encoded. The problem was that re-encoding a video created a new file. The fingerprint changed. You needed a way to match the new file back to the original entry in the ledger without relying on metadata that could be stripped. William said, "So the fingerprint needs to survive the re-encoding?" James said, "Yes, essentially." William said, "Is there something in the content itself, not the wrapper, but the actual visual content, that stays consistent enough to match against, even after compression?" Priya said, "Perceptual hashing." James said, "We've tried perceptual hashing." Priya said, "You've tried it on the wrong layer." James looked at her. Priya said, "You've been hashing the full frame." You need to hash specific regions, stable regions, areas of a face that don't move much between frames, that compression doesn't destroy because the codec prioritizes them for visual quality. If you pick the right regions, your hash survives re-encoding at most standard compression rates. There was a pause. William said, "Has that been tested?" Priya said, "Not yet." I was thinking it through in the first presentation, the running gag. And I use that term with full awareness of how undignified it sounds in the context of a serious technical effort was the name of the tool. The project did not have an official name. This was intentional. Naming it prematurely would have required internal approvals and communication sign-offs that would have slowed everything down, but people kept needing to refer to it, and so it accumulated names organically throughout the day, none of which stuck and none of which anyone agreed on. Tom called it the verifier, Kemi called it the ledger. James called it Truthmark at one point, which caused Daniel to make a sound of such genuine suffering that James immediately withdrew it. William, at one point, referred to it simply as the thing we're building, which was accurate but not useful. An IT support technician who came in around noon to sort out a connectivity issue asked what they were working on, was told a deepfake detection and provenance system, and said, "Oh, like a lie detector for videos?" and left, and for approximately 20 minutes after that, everyone called it the lie detector until Fatima pointed out that this was both technically inaccurate and would be a public relations catastrophe if the name ever became official. By 2 in the afternoon, it was called something different every 20 minutes, and everyone had quietly stopped trying to resolve it. At 12:45, William suggested an approach to the provenance chain that James politely explained would not work because it assumed all platforms used consistent timestamp formats, which they did not. William said, "Right? Okay." James said, "It's a good instinct, just not how the infrastructure actually behaves." William said, "What does it actually do?" James explained. William said, "So you need a normalization layer before the chain entry." James paused. "Yes, that's exactly what you'd need. Can you build that?" James said, "Rohan probably can." "Let me go ask Rohan." This was, I noted in my notebook, the moment the session shifted from a group of people sitting in the same room with the same problem to a group of people actually building something together. William had not solved anything. He had asked the right question at the right moment and then immediately redirected the credit to the person who could action it. It was, in its quiet way, a form of technical leadership that had nothing to do with authority and everything to do with attention. At 2:53 in the afternoon, they ran the tool for the first time. It was not a full version. It was not close to a full version. It was a functional prototype of the perceptual hashing layer that Priya had described in the morning, combined with a basic provenance chain that Rohan had spent 2 hours building from scratch, which he described as ugly but operational, which in the context of that room was high praise. Tom had prepared 20 test videos for the initial run. A mixture of authentic footage and synthetic content, ranging from obvious fakes to the kind of high-quality deepfakes that had been used in real-world disinformation incidents. He had also prepared one video specifically for the demonstration, a clean, well-lit piece of footage that he described as a neutral control, something with no obvious flags, to show that the tool did not produce false positives on ordinary content. He ran the demonstration video first. The tool flagged it as synthetic. The room went very quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet when something has gone wrong and nobody is quite sure how wrong, Daniel said. "That's a false positive," Tom said. "It shouldn't be. I shot that this morning," Kemi said. "What camera?" Tom said. "The model." Fatima said, "Does that camera apply any in-body processing to the footage before writing to the card?" Tom said he didn't know. Priya was already looking at the flag the tool had generated. She was not panicking. She had the expression of someone reading a document carefully before deciding how to feel about it. William said, "What does the flag say specifically?" Priya read it out. The tool had identified an inconsistency in the perceptual hash of a specific facial region across a sequence of frames, the kind of inconsistency that the tool had been trained to associate with synthetic generation. Kemi said, "Or with in-camera stabilization processing." Everyone looked at Tom. Tom looked at his camera. Rohan said quietly from the far end of the table, "Tom, is there any chance that video is actually synthetic?" Tom said, "Of course it isn't. I filmed it myself." He stopped. "Oh, the demonstration video was in fact a deepfake, not a malicious one." Tom had apparently prepared 2 demonstration videos the previous evening, one authentic, one synthetic, and had labeled them on his laptop, and had then at some point between the previous evening and that morning mixed up which was which. The video he had described as a neutral control, the one he had presented as authentic footage he had shot himself that morning, was the synthetic test case he had prepared as a comparison example. The tool had been correct. The room took approximately 20 minutes to fully process this. Daniel said, "So the tool works." Priya said, "The tool works." James said Tom flagged the wrong video. Tom put his face in his hands. William said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "So we spent 20 minutes worrying that the tool produced a false positive, and the tool had in fact produced a true positive that we weren't expecting because the human running the demonstration made a labeling error." Tom, still with his face in his hands, said yes. William said, "So the tool is more reliable than the human." Someone I genuinely could not see who laughed. Then someone else did. Then the room slowly came down from the tension of the previous 20 minutes and into something that felt almost like relief, not triumph. The problem was still enormous and the prototype was still rough and there were hours of work still ahead of them. But the tool had done the thing the tool was supposed to do. It had looked at a video and said, "This is not what it appears to be," and it had been right. That is not nothing. By 4:20, Priya had not moved from her seat in 2 hours. The serial bar upper from Kemi's monitor had migrated to the bin. Daniel's mechanical keyboard had produced a volume of input that I suspected would take weeks to fully process into anything useful, but which he seemed to understand completely. Rohan had filled 6 pages of a legal pad with handwriting so small it was essentially its own compression algorithm. Tom had recovered from the labeling incident with the particular resilience of someone who has been embarrassed professionally enough times to know that the only way through it is to keep working. The provenance chain was running on all 20 test videos. The perceptual hashing layer had been adjusted twice based on the results from the first run. The false positive rate on the authentic videos was 0.3%, which James said was already better than 2 of the 3 most widely used commercial detection tools currently on the market, and which he said in the tone of voice people use when they are trying not to sound too pleased about something before they are sure it is real. At 4:41, Priya typed a final sequence of code into the terminal window on her screen. Not dramatically, not with any announcement. She typed it the way she had been typing all day, with the complete focus of someone for whom the keyboard was simply the surface between thinking and doing. She ran the tool on all 200 videos in the full test set. The results came back in 11 seconds. She looked at the screen, then she looked at it again, then she sat back in her chair and said nothing. William, who had been talking to James about the normalization layer documentation, noticed that Priya had stopped moving. He walked over. He looked at the screen. The results were clean. Not perfect. The tool had produced 4 flagged results in the authentic set that would need further investigation. And there were 3 synthetic videos in the high compression category where the confidence score was lower than they wanted, but across 200 videos, the core detection logic was holding. The provenance chain was logging correctly. The perceptual hashing was surviving re-encoding at every standard compression rate they had tested. It was not a finished product. It was not ready for deployment. It was not going to be announced tomorrow or next week, or possibly even this year, because the gap between a working prototype in a controlled test environment and a tool robust enough for real-world use at scale was exactly the kind of gap that took years and serious resources and constant refinement to close. But it worked. William looked at the screen for a moment, then he nodded once. Not a performance of nodding. Not the kind of nod you give when you want people to see you reacting to something. The kind of nod you give when you have been waiting to find out if something is real. And it is real, and you need a second to let that settle, he said. This is good, Priya said. It's a start. William said, yes, that was the whole exchange. Kemi, from across the room, said, what are we calling it? Rohan said. We are not calling it the lie detector. Fatima said, we are definitely not calling it Truthmark. Daniel typed something with perhaps slightly more force than necessary. James said, we should probably let the communications team name it. Tom said, the communications team will call it something like SafeView or TrustLens. Daniel said, TrustLens is actually not terrible. Everyone looked at him. Daniel said, I said not terrible. I didn't say good. William said, we don't need to name it today. And they didn't. I left Kensington just after 5:30. The light had changed the way London light changes in the early evening in late spring. Still enough of it to see by, but softening at the edges, the sharp lines of the buildings going slightly warmer. I had 3 pages of handwritten notes, an audio recording that would take me the better part of a day to transcribe properly, and the particular feeling you carry out of rooms where something real has happened but no one has yet announced it. A single GCHQ liaison vehicle. I had seen the officer earlier, a quiet man named Greg, who had sat in the corner for the entire day and said precisely 4 things, pulled out ahead of me onto the road and disappeared into the flow of traffic. No lights, no urgency, just a van going somewhere. I checked the news on my phone while I walked back to the station. William's evening engagement was already running on 2 outlets, a hospital visit in the east of the city, a new children's oncology wing. Photographs already filed, the kind of story that generates warmth and coverage and a clear public record of presence. He had been there. He had spoken to the staff and the families. He had done the thing that the role required. None of the outlets mentioned Kensington. There had been no announcement. There would not be one, not yet. Not until the work had progressed far enough to say something concrete about what had been built and what it could do and what it couldn't. The communications team, whoever eventually got the job of framing this for the public, would do it when there was something solid enough to frame. Until then, it existed in the space between the doing and the telling, which is where most real work lives for most of its life. I thought about the video of William that Tom had shown at the start of the day. The clean, confident, entirely false footage of a real human being saying something that had never happened. I thought about the 61 hours it had taken to remove it. I thought about the 1.4 million views, and the regional outlets that had cited it as a source, and the 11 days and the legal filing and the 6 languages. I thought about Priya sitting back in her chair and not saying anything. I thought about the nod. Here's the thing about truth that nobody particularly wants to hear. It does not defend itself. It does not trend. It does not travel as fast as a confident lie with good production values and a Saturday morning upload window. It does not self-correct in real time or automatically flag itself or instinctively resist, being shared by people who want it to be true. Truth needs people. Specifically, it needs people who are willing to sit in a room with institutional coffee and a whiteboard with ghost letters on it and argue about perceptual hashing and normalization layers and what to call a tool that doesn't have a name yet, and keep going until something works. Not something perfect, something that works, and then come back tomorrow to make it work better. That is unglamorous. It does not photograph well, it will not trend. But it is, in the end, the only kind of winning that actually matters. Marcus, at the coffee shop, asked me the next morning how the thing had gone, whatever it was. I said it had gone well, I thought. He said, "You think?" I said, "Something worked. It's a start." He nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable answer and handed me my flat white. I went home to write it up.